acorns, mighty oaks grow. And it might seem a monumental task right now, the idea that come the 22nd of May, TUSC is going to present probably the largest electoral opposition seen in generations. The hope is, of course, that there will be in excess of 625 candidates, which is 15% of the total seats. Now, I say it seems like a monumental task.
Nationally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like a monumental task. We have used our campaign in Hillingdon. As a former Labour councillor, I was expelled from the Labour Party 1 month before the elections in 1994. I had been the Assistant Secretary of the All Britain Anti-Poll Tax Federation. I was elected onto the council in 1990, and they stood an official candidate in opposition to me, and I got re-elected with an increased vote at that time in 94. I retired off the council in 1998 due to personal health, but also my wife's particularly ill health, and she still is quite ill. But since then, I've held every Saturday morning, I hold an advice session in a cafe up in Northwood Hills, where I live, from 8 o'clock until 12 noon. I've dealt with housing cases, domestic violence, racism, employment, all the gamut. And I'll tell you what's possible. Because whilst I had been a councillor in Hillingdon East, which is the other side of the borough, which was a Labour-held-ish ward, for the first time ever, I stood in 2010 as an independent, but as a socialist and a trade unionist in the ward where I actually live. I live in a council estate. We still live in a council house, although most of the houses have already been bought and sold on numerous occasions. But in this Tory ward, literally on a shoestring, we were able to get over 15% of the vote. And it shocked the Tories. I was expecting maybe 200 votes, just 200, just as a reflection of some of the casework that I've been doing, etc. But to get over 900 votes came as a shock. The point I make is, if it's possible to make an inroad into one of the staunchest Tory areas in London, then it's possible to make inroads and to give a voice to our class. And that's fundamentally what this is all about. You've seen the speech by Miliband last night, more or less endorsing Thatcher for being very strong in her beliefs, and she was very clear as a leader. She was very clear about what she stood for. And she was. She was absolutely implacable in her commitment to stand up for the beliefs and to represent the interests of the capitalist class. And what we need on our side, for us as ordinary workers and the wider working class, are representatives who will stand up on the side of our class. We use it in Hillingdon. We set up an anti-cuts campaign in November 2010. We've held numerous meetings across the borough. It's one of the largest in London. It's actually the second largest. We're 42 square miles. We're 14 miles long, about 3 miles wide. Excuse me. And it's quite a difficult area. At the moment, the composition of the council is 18 Labour and 47, I think, Tory. And yet the 18 Labour Party councillors, mainly in John McDonnell's constituency, which is in Hayes and Harlington, and I live in Ruislip, Norwood and Pinner. But of the 18, not a single one of the Labour councillors has ever called a public meeting, has ever produced a leaflet, has ever written a letter to the local paper to criticise or to organise opposition, or even to explain the implications of the cuts. Now that's how politically bankrupt the so-called Labour Party has actually become. They have never made a contribution to any of our meetings, and we've held over 40, maybe even 50 meetings in the borough, every part of it, since 2010. They've never turned up. So when people ask us, where are you going to stand, Wally? Are you going to stand in every ward? Our ambition, we'd love to stand in every single ward. And let none of the left tell us, oh, you can't stand against the Labour Party there, you can't stand this. It's nonsense. If these people are not prepared to fight and even raise the flag of socialism when they're in opposition, can you imagine what they'll be like when they're in government? And we've seen what they're like. We've had 13 years of it. I just want to draw up some figures, what we're trying to do in Hillingdon, and I'm sure it can be and will be done everywhere. Because we make the point again and again. You meet so many people who say, oh, you that word voting, Wally, I'm not going to vote. I wish there was a box, none of the above. But our position has been from day one, be one of the above. Be the one worth voting for. Be the one that your work colleagues, your neighbours, your families, your friends will campaign and vote for. Whether you get 1% of the vote or 51% of the vote is neither here nor there. The thing is, right now, our class needs representatives to speak up on behalf of us. That's what we When you consider 0.78% of the population in the UK are millionaires, and 78% of the government are multi-millionaires. And these people are supposed to know about our lives. These people haven't got a clue, including the Labour benches. They know all about hunger. They were late for their dinner once. Their only experience of poverty was an out-of-order cash machine. They've got no understanding what it's like not to have the money to pay the bills or anything of the sort. Do you know, we one of the slogans we used during the poll tax days, and I was sent on a speaking tour on behalf of the All Britain Fed to the United States and Canada in June of 1990. Now, I got a bit of a stammer, and my stammer was much worse at that time. But I became so angered about what was going on, I actually got involved in the campaign. And I made the prediction at loads of meetings. I spoke in 9 or 10 of cities in the US and in Canada, some small and some quite large meetings, and made a prediction that the poll tax would be defeated by the end of the year and Thatcher would be gone. Now that was 1990, June 1990, and some of the comments said, Wally, don't be so categoric. I'm telling you, I said, I have the feeling there's 18 million or whatever wasn't paying, hadn't paid a penny or were now in arrears. The courts were clogged up. Even in Maidenhead, out in Surrey, we went to meetings out there and we spoke at meetings and went to the courts, clogged up the courts. And sure enough, Thatcher went in the November of that year. We hoped at that time that we could continue to build on that, so that, because we'd given our class some confidence. We had given our class confidence. People went to the court for the first time ever, and we said, don't just deal with the housing officers. Ask and demand that your case be heard personally, which you're entitled to under the law. And by the way, it's the same now in relation to the council tax. The vast majority of people who come to me with the council tax, whether they're from Ealing or Harrow or from my own borough in Hillingdon, they've been to the court, but they've never gone into the magistrate. They've always done the deal with the council officers, and yet they're still charged court costs. So I've written to Ealing and Hillingdon and Harrow over a number of cases, and I've asked them, and it might be worthwhile doing it here, asking the council's legal or the financial directors, what dates were the liability orders issued? Who was the magistrate who was sitting on the bench, and how many of the council taxpayers actually went in to see the magistrate? Ergo, how come they're being charged court costs? And it is a scam. It really is a scam. They've colluded, the magistrates' court and the council officers have colluded for years and tried to do the same with the poll tax.
Have you got a response?
Sorry?
Did you get a response?
No, we haven't got a response yet. But it's noticeable that, particularly in Harrow, they're treating their people who are in arrears a little differently, and they're certainly doing the same in Hillingdon. The point that we're trying to make, and when you think back of the poll tax, we had no support from the Labour Party, any more than we've had support from the Labour Party other than mouthing stuff in relation to the bedroom tax or anything else. The government have got away with literally a scorched earth policy since 2010, following on, of course, from what Blair and Brown had continued to do from the Thatcher years and from the Major years. There has been no opposition to them. We're trying to fight to defend our class, social security, the welfare state, on all fronts, from the NHS, and yet over 206 MPs and peers have got financial interests in companies who are applying for, bidding for, and winning contracts for the privatisation of the NHS. Now, when I was a councillor, I could not even be at the meeting to discuss anything that I was personally involved in, let alone had a financial interest in, which I never did, of course. But it just shows you how far back it's gone, how rotten and corrupt it's gone. And by the way, I don't think I'm exaggerating in saying the vast majority of ordinary people understand that. The vast majority of people think, well, they're all rotten, they're all crooked, how can we expect anything to be different? But it's from that low ebb. Underneath that, there's a veneer of anger, and it's rage. But it's often expressed in racist terms or xenophobic terms, particularly in relation to immigration, the European borders, and this, that, and the other. And we always make the point that the capitalist class, the political and the financial elites have never, ever, ever planned for the needs of the vast majority of us, i.e. ordinary working people. They have only ever planned for their own enrichment. It makes no odds to them, no matter how many people are competing for rental, because they own the houses. So the more people competing for rental houses, the rents go up. By implication, the house value goes up. The more people competing for jobs drives down wages, the employers get richer. So they don't give a damn. But we make the point that it's not any more than it was Irish. When I came here first as a young man, I slept for 3 weeks in Hyde Park. Written on notice boards down in Croydon, don't ask me how I got there. Written on notice boards was accommodation, room to let, no blacks, no dogs, and no Irish. I got a job in the Cumberland Hotel in Marble Arch through one of the Spanish and Italian waiters who used to play a game of football on their afternoon shifts, and I managed to get a job. And there I worked on building sites and buses and this, that, and the other. But we make the point that it's not Bulgarians and Romanians that we should be having a row with. It's the bloody Etonians. It's that class. Those are the ones who don't give a damn. Those are the ones who put up their flags of patriotism. These are the people who'd sell their own mothers, and literally sell their own mothers to make a fast buck. For us, it is a wonderful opportunity for us to make an impact into the consciousness of ordinary people, to show stalls on the street, and we make the point again and again, it wasn't the unemployed, the sick or the disabled, it wasn't the pensioners, it wasn't the low paid, it wasn't the immigrants who caused the crash. It was the bankers and the speculators, and make the super rich parasites pay their taxes. If the deficit when they took over was just in excess of £80 billion year on year, and by Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs through the PCS, and they've confirmed the figures are, every year avoided and evaded taxes by the super rich and the corporations is almost £125 billion a year. If they collected that money, you'd actually have a surplus every year, but they don't. But their ordinary working people fall behind in their council tax. Within a week or 2 weeks, you get threatened with this, that, and the other. You lose your ability to pay by instalments and trade, taking to court, and all of that.
Another couple of minutes.
Sorry, yeah. So I was just about to actually end. So it is important that we use the language of our class. I'm not saying that you're effing blind, although occasionally some people do, but that we use and we relate to our class the difficulties that they're going through, and that we understand it, because we do. Because there's not a person in this room who does not know what it's like not to have enough money to meet your instalments, to make this, that, and the other. During the poll tax, we said, there's a law that says, if you don't pay your rent, it's against the law. If you don't pay your council tax or poll tax at that time, it's against the law. If you don't pay your mortgage, it's against the law. If you don't properly feed and clothe your kids, it's against the law. So where's the bloody law that says that we should earn enough if we're in work, or receive enough in benefits if we're unemployed, to enable us to live within the bloody law? Just on that basis alone, you get an echo, and we do get an echo. It really is important that we do. And the final point, you'll know that the tube strike has been suspended. We produced a leaflet over in Hillingdon. We went on the picket lines, and our first 2 paragraphs in the leaflet, which got a great echo. Once again, people that weren't sure about them going on strike and causing all this right away. And the point we made, and we make it everywhere, if you're unemployed, you get called a scrounger, you get called a parasite, you get called a faker, you get called everything by the politicians and by the press and the media. And yet, if you're a worker and you get organised and you try to defend yourself so that you won't end up unemployed, these same morons will attack you then. And it's perfectly clear then in the minds of ordinary workers whose side we're on. For us, of us, and by us. No careerists or carpetbaggers need apply. We want fighters for our class. Thank you.